Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners. And if you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also access all of our resources for business owners by downloading our BizSmart app. Our host joining me today is BizSmart Select member Paul Rhodes. Thank you, Paul. Over to you.
Hello. Today I'm going to talk about an approach to kind of improving efficiencies in your business, and particularly from a software perspective and optimizing processes. So we'll dive into kind of like how you can go through identifying processes that you might want to optimize, and then looking at the difference really between bespoke, which is obviously custom built software specifically for yourself, and off-the-shelf solutions, and how you can stitch those together. We'll dive straight into that. So it's probably worth saying who we are. We're called Green Gorilla Software. We're basically a software development company based in Worcester, and we're a small team, and I've been running the company now for about 6 years. I've run my own development company since about 2010. So this is based basically on conversations I have with a lot of business owners really, and operations directors who are looking to kind of improve their businesses, grow them, and have identified some critical processes that need to be improved. So really the key questions and stuff out of this are just my own first-hand experience of doing what we do. And sometimes we're always honest with people, so sometimes the solution isn't necessarily to invest in bespoke. It's you could achieve, we'll come on to it, but 80% of what you're trying to achieve with off-the-shelf software. So we're going to explore how you might have that conversation with yourself and how you might deliberate between it. And then it says at the bottom, like we're huge advocates of remote working and a thing called the lean startup that we'll touch upon. So I'm going to try and pull all these conversations that I have with people, all of the kind of different principles that I kind of abide by, and pull it into some sort of presentation really over the next 10 minutes or so. The key question for me really that I get asked a lot is should I build my own solution to solve an internal process issue, or should I use an off-the-shelf system, like, and people have started mentioning things like CRM systems or all sorts of industry specific software as well. And I think I get asked this question in many forms. Sometimes it's cost led, sometimes it's about speed, but also it can I interpret that as ultimately how do you streamline a process cost effectively. So to me, the thing at the center of it is the process, and actually whether it's a bespoke system or an off the shelf is a secondary thing. First, we need to identify the core process that we want to improve. So to do that, we really need to draw upon a few principles really. So when we go into a business and we go and talk to the business owner or the ops director or a team member about a specific bottleneck in the company, we always bring it back to the Pareto's law, which I'm sure you're all familiar with because it's bounded around loads in business, but it does apply, I firmly believe, to like everything in life. So that 20% of what you do will actually give you 80% of the results. So when we're looking at processes, or we're looking at how a business generates revenue or profits, or how it fulfills any kind of service, you can boil it down to try to first of all identify that 20% that's giving you the 80% of results. So when we come on to kind of exploring different processes and things to optimize, I think it's always worth coming back to this rule. And the one that's discussed a lot generally is that 20% of your customers will bring in 80% of your revenue, and 20% of your customers are bringing 80% of your headaches. So I think it applies to nature as well, but I mean there's loads and loads of podcasts and stuff around it. I'm a huge fan of the 4-hour work week, and he talks about it a lot. Obviously trying to optimize time in that scenario. So it's a theme that will run through what I try and discuss. So we'll move on from there. And the other one is something that's at the heart of what we do, but it's more geared in its initial outset to product development. So if you're trying to create a new product, like ultimately to become an off-the-shelf solution. But I think it's got some really good meanings and trends through this simple statements that relate to trying to alleviate an internal process. And for me, it's all about eliminating waste. It's trying to identify the 10 steps that you might do to service a customer, and how can you look at each of those steps and identify where you can improve, or even skip those steps or automate. So yeah, the lean startups at the heart of kind of my thinking and our approach to when we're reviewing processes for customers. And the guy who kind of coined the term and founded the lean startups called Eric Ries, based on a lot of Steve Blank's work. So if you've got any interest in product development and lean as an actual kind of product development led function, then those two guys are really good ones to look at. So we'll skip on and we'll look at, and I must apologise for these slides because they do get very, very wordy, and I thought, oh my goodness, there's nothing worse, is there? But I'll try and sum it up. I'll try to be as impartial as possible, and we're a massive believer and user in off-the-shelf software. So in my business alone, we spend, I think it's over £350 a month on off-the-shelf software. So even though we're a bespoke company, we use lots and lots of different systems to drive efficiencies in our company. So I've used that mindset as to like coming up with the pros and cons of to why we use certain systems and why we haven't just gone and built our own because we can. So yeah, so if we start with the pros, off the shelf to me it's an existing product, and typically it's becoming more and more SaaS products, software as a service, where you'll kind of lease the product. 5-10 years ago, we would all go out and buy a CD, install Office into our computers, and we'd pay one-off for that piece of software. Nowadays, everything is driven over the internet as connected services, and we pay monthly or annual license fees to have that software, and we benefit from updates. It's constantly innovating, there's constantly new features. So SaaS is a huge movement, and that's ultimately what we build. By using an existing product as well, you benefit from a community. So there's lots of people out there, can be on lots of different chat rooms and forums and stuff, but who are sharing knowledge. Often, because it's a product, it's very feature rich. So you might want, let's say, a really simple way to create invoices, and what you'll probably find is the software product that you decide upon will do much, much more than create just invoices, and it will connect to services and stuff. So that's one of the advantages. It'll do more than you think you need. Often it's low cost. I mean, a lot of SaaS products will run a free version even, up to a limited use, and then also you get trials so you can actually embed it in your company, and then typically you can pick up versions of a software for like less than $10 a month in a lot of mainstream products. The other thing is speed. So in terms of speed to market, in terms of you benefiting from it. So if you've identified a process and the block is, I don't know, automatically sending something to a customer, and you found a piece of software that will do that, then your time to implement is very, very small, and you can start benefiting from that. It's also generally stable, which, as much as I love bespoke software, you've always got the ability that you're developing something new. So there's lots of different testing and repercussions and scenarios to run through. So it's very stable software, and obviously there's the dedicated help and support team as well you can reach out to. It's often documented, and developers can hook into it as well, depending on what the software is, and potentially there's an instant return on investment as well. So some of the amazing pros, I mean, they're not definitive, and it's only my thoughts, but as to why you would use a software product that already exists. Some of the cons, that to one customer it may matter to extremely. In other ways, it's not really a con at all, but ultimately you don't own the data in a lot of products. You're inputting your data into their system, but when it comes to the actual ownership of that data, it's at the ownership of the software provider. Often, even though they're very powerful tools, they can be quite complicated to adopt in terms of training and configuration. So what it might suggest on the tin as to what it can do might require quite a lot of customization or configuration to get it working how you want it to work. And with that is training as well in team members. sometimes they can be quite expensive at scale. So what I mean of that is if you've got one user, they can be very low entry points. But if you've got lots of different services running on these systems, or you've got lots of different users, they can get into like thousands of pounds a month to operate. You've got potentially, depending on what the product is, limited customization. So sometimes these products are completely standalone and you can't do anything else with it. Other times you can integrate into different services. One thing that comes up a lot in the conversations with where people have built a suite, their processes around the suite of products is they end up with lots of systems. And I know that kind of it's not unusual for me to talk to a company who might be running 8 to 10 different online systems that are running their business from one scenario to another. And as a result of that, you can actually end up with like no central system and lots of duplication. So you might have to enter a contact into one system and then enter it into another and into another. And basically there's a lot of extra admin as a result of using the system. And one of the biggest things, sometimes a driver that goes towards the bespoke thing, is there's actually like a lack of visibility of the management data. So the kind of core key process indicators that go through the business, they don't actually get a single view of that. They have to look in multiple systems and dig down. The data's there, but it might not be in the format that the business owner wants to measure on. So sometimes that's a part. The other thing is, because you're using an off-the-shelf software, there's an argument it could be easily copied. If I was running an accounting practice and I use a certain software, there's not a huge differentiator between another accounting practice and using the same software. And then the other thing is, it's obviously a direct cost on your P&L. It's not an asset in any way, shape, or form. And so those are some bold statements from me about the pros and cons of off-the-shelf. So I think it's evenly weighted. So moving on to looking at a bespoke system. So I've tried to do the same. So effectively, when I talk about a bespoke system, it's a system that you have identified a process in your business that you want to improve. Option A is you can stitch together or use an off-the-shelf existing product and again achieve 80% of what you want to achieve. Bespoke software is the reverse. It's where you would in-house use a developer, or you might use a contractor or a freelancer, or you might use a team or a company to create something that's unique to yourself. Often you can actually create that process and then productize it and end up being an off-the-shelf service provider. But in this context, we'll talk about it from being simply you're developing your processes unique to yourself, some software to run it. So, the pros are you've got absolute maximum flexibility. It's your product to design. It's your process to optimize. So you have all that knowledge about how you see it working best, rather than adopting somebody's existing, vision of how you should run a process. And you can design it entirely to meet the goals of the objectives of the strategy, really. So if you're, we'll come on to an example, but if a real problem in your business is that you're losing leads as a result of X, you can design a piece of software specifically to address that issue and to make maximum gains there. KPI, so key performance indicators like the critical data, is a lot easier to report on because you're designing the system, so you can make it at forefront and center that, when you log in, you want to see exactly these 3 metrics across your business or so. You own all the data, so anything that's put into your system is yours, subject to obviously conversations with whoever developed it. I've seen that go south a few times where that hasn't been clear up front. Not with us. So, and again, you get to define what I'd say design the most efficient process. So sometimes with an off-the-shelf, you might have reduced your process from say 7 steps to 5, but actually it might be achievable in 3. If it was bespoke, you definitely have the ability to create a competitive advantage. If you can come up with a process and a really smart way of working, and you can design some software around that, then it's hard to replicate because it's just not an existing plug-and-play system. The other thing is you actually own that intellectual property, which, going to the last point, adds value to your business. If somebody was to look at purchasing your business, they're not just buying the kind of sales ledger and the performance and the potential business there, they're also buying a tangible asset that sometimes they split off and sell. And then the other thing is you can benefit from R&D tax claims, and you can also apply for grants because you're developing innovation. So it all comes under, to a degree, it can all come under an innovation umbrella. Obviously the costs, the cons, generally around time and cost. So it can take time to develop a solution, whereas you might roll out something immediately using an off-the-shelf. It's going to take time to identify what to build, how to build it. You'll definitely have an initial development cost that will be for the delivery of what we might call phase 1 or iteration 0. And again, it can be quite complex. Instead of taking something that you can just start using straight away, you've got to use a lot of thought process to identify the most efficient way. Or definitely, if we're talking about software, it'll definitely require some level of software development. Although there are solutions coming out now where you can automate, again, off the shelf, use without writing code. And then the other thing is cost to iterate. So you've got your version 1 out there, it's running a process in your business, and you suddenly realise, which always happens, you've addressed bottleneck 1, and now you've identified bottleneck 2. So you kind of go down an ever changing list of roadmap items to fix. And so obviously every time you iterate, it's going to incur more development costs, whether that's internal and external. And so with all that in mind, the return on investment can be a much longer period of time compared to if I was spending $50 a month on a piece of software and I knew that instantly saved me an hour. I've got instant ROI really. And then ongoing costs. There's definitely costs around if you're doing an online thing, everything from hosting, X, Y, Z, where it's all wrapped up into a service fee really from the existing off-the-shelf provider. So that's kind of an overview of some of the pros and cons of Bespoke. So I'd always say step back from the technical rollout in terms of which solution is better. I mean, depending on the scenario, one option is better than the other, and in another scenario they switch places. I think the key thing is how do you even get started with optimizing a process? And often it's about identifying a core process. So going back to the Pareto law of the 80-20, if you were to brainstorm really what is a critical thing that is causing delays with customers or customer satisfaction or could increase sales, it's usually increase sales, reduce admin, reduce costs, those sorts of things. If there's something that you're doing either not consistently because you haven't got a process in the first place, or you do have a process but that it's fundamentally flawed, they stick out almost immediately in your mind. When we go and talk to business owners, they know what the process is that they're trying to fix. And so then you need to scale that up to thinking big. You need to think about, if you could solve this process and others across the business, what would that look like? And then you come back to starting small. So, okay, let's now refocus in with that vision of where we could take this kind of process improvement and back to, even smaller than they originally thought, like, phase 1. And then a fundamental question, can it be solved with an off-the-shelf? Do you actually ever need to build Bespoke? Is there anything unique about what you're trying to do? How are you going to measure it, and what does success look like? So these are kind of my typical questions when we get started. And a good thing to explore is that it's a Sandler term that I picked up, but it's called paying by numbers. So really trying to identify the cost to the business of not taking any action. And you can do this by identifying some sort of core metrics in your business around the process, any direct time and money costs, and also the potential savings. So I was at a company recently, and I was sat with the sales director, and they were literally having this conversation with me, being very transparent, saying, we don't know which way to go. It could be an off-the-shelf solution, and we've looked at these solutions that exist, or it could be a bespoke one, and we're really at kind of a crossroads. So an exercise we did was to kind of look at the cost of not taking any action. So it came down to they sell a specific service, and they know that if they had a systemized way of handling referrals in their business, they're going to increase their potential number of leads a year. And they gave some very, very specific examples. Like anybody in your business, you'll know the ins and outs of what's specific to you and where your challenges are. So we did some simple numbers. So over a year, they get 500 leads. And then basically they know how many they convert and all their stats around that. And they're using 2 different systems to run the sales pipeline at the moment. Across the business, they've got 10 different systems that they run. So simple figures, they get an average of 500 leads a year. And they've identified that because of this process being either inefficient or not followed or not consistent, they're losing about the opportunity to do an extra 10%. And that's a conservative estimate. So then we look at, well, that's 50 leads. And then we worked out the average value of a lead, taking into account conversion, everything else. They know that they sell actually quite high value products. But they know that if they work out all the calculations, their average lead value is £1,000. So therefore, you can say by solving this process, there's £50,000 worth of return on investment up for grabs, potential. And these were conservative figures on their behalf. Now, obviously, the figures completely differ from sector, from business to business. But I think you have to start off with what's the process or the inefficient process costing, and where can we make the gains. So suddenly, not creating a budget for them, but to say, would you invest £5,000 to fix that problem? The answer would probably be yes, and even up to, I'd argue, £10,000–20,000. So it's a good way to start looking at what a potential solution would look like. So I've got 2 examples. Again, I'm using I'm keeping it very loose because we always like to work confidentially. So the first one is I've called them Acme classic events. So fundamentally, they do car exhibitions, and their problem when I went and spoke to them was about registering attendees and exhibitors, 2 very different user groups for events, and it was a really manual process. They were coming in via written paper forms. This is 2018, by the way, and they were taking checks. So it's quite a fundamental manual process, very operations driven. However, events were massively successful, profitable business, and a classic kind of small business that was working really well. So thinking big, they'd love to get to a position where they automate the entire process, and everything you see on there. I'm so sorry about the amount of text on this screen. I was trying to go through methodically and answer the questions, but ultimately we decided to start small and look at how could you just solve the problem for exhibitors. And they've got an event coming up in 6 months' time. So could it be solved with off-the-shelf? They were using spreadsheets to basically manage everything in the business. And through simply identifying the process, mapping it out, brainstorming it with team members, we could identify that actually taking leads via their existing website registrations, adding in a plugin there, linking it through to a CRM system with a payment would basically solve their problem. So they still wanted to maintain the manual option because of the nature of their exhibitors and how people are used to working. So that was a key part of it. So then it also needed to have the functionality that obviously admin can input into the CRM and register people on their behalf. So you start to get a feel for some of the requirements. Was there anything unique about it? There was one caveat, which was that as a result of somebody paying and completing the registration, they would get sent a custom badge and a registration certificate for on the day. So using off-the-shelf entirely, we're able to take from the website the registration data, feed them through to another system that's a payment thing that's off the shelf, feed them through into their CRM when they're paid, and the CRM actually could automatically send it off via a print and post system. So it's completely automated. Not a single piece of bespoke software was needed. And that's kind of how you can start to stitch things together with 2 or 3 systems. So the way they were going to measure it was how many registrations they received via this new system, which was web, how many via post. And then a big thing for them was days per those channels. Could they see a difference? Obviously, if you're taking payment up front before you complete the registration, as opposed to somebody sending a check, and you've got lots of different potential outcomes with checks. So that's how they were going to measure it. And then success was, can they increase the registrations? Does it reduce admin, which was a big driver, and also money in the bank? So that's an example where we go through a process, similar process of shared review, And the result of it is I'm not there to sell them a bespoke system. It's working out what's best for the business to improve that process. We go on to a different company, and it sounds very similar. So the core process that they were having issues with was simply they book appointments for clients to go and see doctors, and they're Acme Medical Services. So their big thought process is they'd love to basically have a complete system where they can automate every part of their business delivering these client services. They were running spreadsheets again, and they were basically had lots of people. It was an really admin intensive company, and for them to double their ability to take on new customers, they had to double the amount of people they employed because of the process. And as part of the delivery, there's 3 or 4 different providers get involved at different points, so it's quite a complex solution as well in terms of how they actually deliver it. So from an end user, you're booking an appointment, but there's lots of different departments and stuff involved. So could it be solved with an off-the-shelf? So heavy use of spreadsheets, so we know we can take spreadsheets into any kind of online system. They'd already done extensive research into different medical services. It's not an unusual sector. Booking system, everything from almost like dental practice sort of stuff through to specifically aimed at pharma, really. But nothing they'd reviewed got close to their unique processes. And I haven't obviously gone into detail here, but it's how they win their new customers. So they win new customers based on their service level agreements and what they can actually deliver and the evidence that they've got. So fundamentally, it's a complicated approach. It's unique in their customer advantage, it's their competitive advantage, and there isn't a one size fits all. So it was anything unique, yet the entire process that they go through start to finish is an element of basically genius, really, in terms of they're offering something on the tin that looks like any other business, but what they've done inherently in their business is an alternative way of doing it. Again, they were very focused on the 80-20 principles and being lean. So the way they're going to measure it was actually they'd settled on it was going to be bespoke. So they can actually dictate the 5 core KPIs that are going to drive that business based on their SLAs. And as a result of it, they've got real-time dashboards. So they can actually not only forecast what's going to happen in the next quarter, they can see to the hour what's happening currently in the business, and then they'll see all the historical stuff around it. And then success to them over time is like a single solution that's not just running the booking of appointments, but every part of the business, really. So pretty much that's examples of bespoke and off the shelf. Sounds like 2 same companies, but very different approaches to fulfilling it. These are some examples of tools that you might be already familiar with that go a step towards automation and things that commonly people stitch together. The 2 at the bottom, if this then that, and Zapier are basically ways for non-software developers to use the APIs that exist in these companies, in these products, to enable them to talk to each other. So a common way, going back to the scenario of somebody does something on a website, say a WordPress website, and it pumps data automatically into CRM, which then pumps it onto an invoice or a payment platform or something. Commonly, people are using tools like Zapier and if this then that, which are like recipes of when somebody does this on my system, do this on another system, and that's kind of a trick of the trade as to how you can start to do stuff. So just to wrap up, in terms of whichever technology solution you went down, and technology is a driver now in most business operations, I think it's about going back to the drawing board and identifying the core process, thinking about ROI, what's the genuine cost, and it could just be a time thing, and then you can equate it to money. Speaking to members of your team as well as customers actually, and then brainstorming it and researching options. They're the kind of 4 good starting points. I think that's it. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. You've got some questions already come through waiting for you. The first one's from Sarah, and she asks, you've just mentioned the tool Zapier. Is this free?
Yeah, so like I said at the start, really, Zapier, I'm pretty sure, I might get this wrong, they're called like the recipes of when this software product talks to this software product. It's called a zap, and I'm pretty sure up to 5 zaps is free of charge. So you can use their products. Obviously, you get ingrained in it and you see the power of it. After 5 zaps, it's a monthly fee. I don't know the exact figures on it. I'd imagine it's something around like $20 a month, but that would enable you to create the next level of zaps. And they have things called premium zaps. So if you're trying to put 2 really common products together, they'll probably be classed as a premium service. So if you're trying to get Zero Talk to a CRM, I'd imagine will be a premium. So you have to have a paid thing. But it's it's probably a matter of tens of dollars a month, nothing more than that, I'd imagine.
Okay.
Should really know, shouldn't I?
Thank you very much. You've got another question now from Jennifer, and she asks, I'm currently using an off-the-shelf system. It's not quite working for me. I spend a bit of time each month adapting. How long do you think I should keep going with it before I change and go bespoke?
It's a big question, difficult one. I think it fundamentally goes back to just because with a change in any system, you've got the time and the cost of actually retraining staff or retraining yourself and configuring it. So I think fundamentally, how well mapped out is the process? If you've got a clear understanding of the kind of the paying by numbers as to what that process is currently costing in its current form, and then can you almost in a flowchart or with post-its or whatever devise a more optimum process, I think then you can go back to the drawing board and say, is it the current system, can that be tweaked? Is it a new off-the-shelf system that does, again, 80% of that, and it's a much better option, so you migrate? Or it would really answer the question of if the ROI is potentially there and you've got a clear mapped out process, then you can start having conversations about how you make that a reality. In terms of how long, that I can't answer that. A typical developer, I can't answer that. So yeah, hopefully that's useful.
Thank you. Thank you again, Paul, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of his presentation and contact details out to you all shortly. So if you do have any further questions, please contact him direct. Before we close, just a quick reminder, if you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also access all of our resources for business owners by downloading the BizSmart app. Thank you very much. That's the end of today's BizSmart webinar. Thank you for listening, and we hope you can join us again very soon.